Not all airports are built equal. Some are absolutely massive, stretching for miles with multiple runways and terminals. But then there are those airports that are so small, it's hard to believe planes even land there. Today we're going to count down 15 of the smallest airport runways in the world. Let's start off with number 15, Juan de Nova Airstrip. This is one of the most remote and least known runways on the entire planet. Located on a tiny uninhabited island in the Mozambique Channel, it's a flat strip of coral and sand, just 3,930 feet long. There are no terminals, lights, or refueling. Just a windswept runway in the middle of the ocean. The island itself is French territory, used mostly by the military, scientists, and conservation teams. Only small aircraft, mostly military transports and occasional charters, land here, and only under perfect weather. The island has no permanent population, but the airstrip plays a key role in ecological research, sea turtle monitoring, and surveillance of surrounding waters. Sudden squalls, extreme humidity, and isolation make every flight here a logistical challenge. From a satellite view, the island looks like a speck surrounded by turquoise reefs. The runway? Just a faint line in the sand, barely visible, but absolutely essential for the rare few who land here. Number 14, Tufi Airport. Tufi Airport sits on the edge of a peninsula in Papua New Guinea's Oro province, overlooking dramatic fjords surrounded by thick jungle. With a runway of just around 2,500 feet, it's one of the most remote functional airstrips in the Pacific. Planes land directly on a rough grass and dirt strip, maintained by local villagers using machetes and hand tools. Flights here are rare, mostly operated by Mission Aviation Fellowship or occasional Air Niugini charters. Pilots rely on visual flying, with no control tower, radar, or weather monitoring. Sudden mists, crosswinds, and tropical storms can completely change flight conditions and your life in mid-air. During the monsoon season, the strip often turns soft or waterlogged. There's no overrun area, and any miscalculation risks plunging down the steep jungle slopes into the fjords. Despite all that, it's a lifeline for emergency medical flights, education, and access. From space, it looks like a thin green scar between ocean and jungle, proof that remote doesn't mean unreachable. Number 13, Heligoland Airport. Heligoland Airport, located on the wind-beaten island of Dune, is one of Europe's most extreme micro-airstrips. The main runway is barely 1,575 feet, and every single inch matters. With open sea on all sides and no buffer zones, pilots have to nail their approach perfectly. Gusts from the North Sea can slam across the runway with no warning, and visibility can disappear in seconds. The airfield has 3 short runways arranged in a triangle to adapt to shifting winds, but none are forgiving. Small aircraft like the BN-2 Islander are the only planes cleared to land, often carrying tourists, supplies, and emergency aid from mainland Germany. One unexpected challenge? Seals. Local harbor seals have been known to wander across the runway, prompting sudden closures. This isn't a scenic landing, it's a precision one. When you touch down here, you're not just flying into a resort island, you're threading a needle between wind, wildlife, and open water. Number 12, Qeqertarsuaq Heliport. Qeqertarsuaq Heliport is barely a blip on Greenland's icy western coastline. But for the people on Disco Island, it's the most important piece of infrastructure they have. Officially a heliport, it's got a gravel runway just 1,476 feet long, used by small aircraft and helicopters to bring in medicine, food, and passengers. There's no road out and no sea access in winter. This is it. The weather? Unforgiving. Winds scream off the Baffin Bay, temperatures plunge below -30 degrees Celsius, and whiteouts can erase visibility in minutes. When snow hits, the landing zone becomes more suggestion than the surface. Bell 212 helicopters and Dash 8 turboprops are the workhorses here, run by Air Greenland. They're not flying for leisure. Every flight is critical. Scientists studying glaciers and wildlife also rely on this hub, using it as a base to push deeper into Greenland's interior. It may not look like much, but in one of the coldest corners of Earth, it's the pulse that keeps the region alive. Number 11. Rancho e Irausquin Airport. This tiny Caribbean runway holds a massive title, shortest commercial runway in the world. Located on the volcanic island of Saba, Rancho e Irausquin Airport's runway is only 400 meters, just 1,312 feet long. Both ends of the strip drop off into the ocean, and the terrain around it is nothing but steep, rocky cliffs. Larger jets don't even bother. Only small turboprops like the Twin Otter or Britain-Norman Islander land here, and only with pilots trained for the island's brutal approach. Wind shear and turbulence from the nearby cliffs hit hard during descent, and once a plane lines up, it's do or die. There's no chance for a go-around. This airport is a literal lifeline for locals and visitors, offering the only fast way on or off the island. Flights are limited and operated exclusively by Windward Islands Airways. From above, the airstrip looks like a thread of asphalt glued to a cliffside, barely visible, totally real. Number 10. Kagata Airport. Kagata Airport in Papua New Guinea is a rugged mountain airstrip cut from the jungle. Tucked deep into the remote highlands, it's one of the least known but most extreme small runways in the world. Carved into a steep slope and surrounded by dense rainforest, Kagata's runway is just 1,730 feet. It's built on a narrow ridge with no room for error. There are no markings, no control tower, and no lighting. Everything depends on a pilot's instincts. Only tough, short takeoff aircraft like the Pilatus PC-6 Porter or DHC-6 Twin Otter can land here, and only in good weather. For thousands of locals, this airstrip is the only way in or out. Without it, a short flight turns into days of jungle trekking. Thick fog rolls in without warning, and heavy rain can turn the strip into a mudslide. But this airstrip is essential, and locals help maintain it by hand. Number 9. Gibraltar International Airport. Gibraltar International Airport is a wild mix of aviation and urban planning. At just 5,250 feet, this runway sits tightly between the sea, the city, and a giant rock. But what really makes it stand out from other mimicky airports is that a major road runs straight across the runway. Winston Churchill Avenue, which is the main link between Gibraltar and Spain, shuts down every time a plane lands or takes off. Well, think railway crossing, except with jets. This rare setup demands razor-precise timing. Add in frequent crosswinds funneled around the Rock of Gibraltar, and you've got one of the trickiest commercial landings in Europe. Pilots must brake hard when the second wheels hit the tarmac. There's no margin. Served by airlines like UK Airways, EasyJet, and Royal Air Maroc, it connects Gibraltar's 34,000 residents to London, Manchester, and Casablanca. It may not be the most scenic airport, but it's definitely one of the most impressive. Number 8. Gustav III Airport. This airport in St. Bart's is small, fast, and not forgiving. At just 2,130 feet, this short runway sits between a steep hill and the turquoise Caribbean Sea. Pilots don't just land here, they dive. The approach involves dropping over a mountain ridge, leveling out in seconds, and sticking the landing before running out of the strip. There's no margin for error. Come in too high, and you overshoot into the ocean. Too low, and you're scraping the hillside. Takeoffs aren't any easier. Planes launch straight toward the water, lifting off just above beachgoers. Only small prop planes and specially trained pilots are cleared to use the airport. It's the main hub for VIPs and private charter flights from nearby islands like St. Martin. For aviation fans, it's a bucket list destination. From the beach below, watching planes land feels unreal. All right now, let's move to number 7. Agatti Airport. Agatti Airport is a coral edge airstrip barely clinging to the Lakshadweep Islands in the Arabian Sea. Built on a sliver of reef just wide enough for one runway and a single terminal, its strip is about 4,200 feet and is surrounded by water so close you can see waves on approach. There's no margin for error, no runway lights, and no advanced landing systems. Pilots rely entirely on visual cues and steady hands, especially during storm season when crosswinds can change conditions in minutes. Landings must be exact, with hard braking before the asphalt runs out. Only ATR-72s are cleared here, connecting this isolated island to Kochi on the mainland. It's not just a transport link, it's everything. Medical evacuations, supply drops, and tourism depend on this tiny strip. Expansion plans exist, but face pushback due to the coral ecosystem. The airstrip is narrow, vital, and exposed, an engineered lifeline slicing through paradise with water on every side. Number 6. Wanaka Airport. Wanaka Airport, tucked in New Zealand's South Island, is small, scenic, and built for adventure. With a 3,930-foot runway, it mainly serves regional aircraft, private charters, skydiving outfits, and emergency ops. Pilots flying into Wanaka face tight mountain passes, turbulent winds, and sudden cloud cover, especially tricky with no backup approach options. Sitting 348 meters above sea level, elevation affects aircraft performance. But this isn't just another airstrip, it's an adventure hub. It's home to some of the world's most scenic skydives and the biennial Warbirds over Wanaka Air Show, one of the Southern Hemisphere's top aviation events. Proposals to expand it for larger commercial traffic have stirred local concern over preserving the region's untouched beauty. For now, it remains a peaceful gateway into the Southern Alps, used by thrill seekers, conservation teams, and rescue crews alike. From above, it blends seamlessly into the mountain landscape, bordered by Lake Wanaka and snow-capped peaks, a tiny strip in a giant wilderness. Number 5. Barra Airport. Barra Airport in Scotland's Outer Hebrides is the only place on Earth where commercial planes land on a beach. No concrete, no asphalt, just wet sand and seaweed. The runway is literally the shore, and it's only usable when the tide is out. At high tide, the entire landing area vanishes underwater. The longest usable stretch is about 2,230 feet, but depending on the tide and wind, pilots adjust their landing zones. Flights are operated by Loganair using Twin Otters, small, rugged planes built for short, tricky landings. There are no lights, no taxiways, and no traditional markings. Instead, wooden poles stuck in the sand help guide pilots on approach. Crosswinds from the Atlantic can be brutal, and the constantly changing beach surface makes every landing different. Still, this airstrip is vital for island residents, connecting them to Glasgow for medical emergencies, cargo deliveries, and travel. From above, it just looks like a normal beach until a plane shows up. Number 4. Svalbard Airport. Svalbard Airport in Longyearbyen isn't just far north, it's practically touching the Arctic Circle. Located at 78 degrees north, it's the world's northernmost commercial airport, operating on a 2,483-meter runway built entirely on permafrost. That's right. The tarmac floats on frozen ground, stabilized by man-made insulation to stop it from cracking during summer melts. But this runway comes with a checklist of extremes. There's limited daylight in winter, sometimes none at all, and fog, ice, and polar storms can appear without warning. Pilots have no nearby alternates. If the weather closes in, they're committed, so aircraft are loaded with extra fuel, just in case. Despite that, the airport is a critical Arctic lifeline, serving researchers, locals, and the trickle of tourists heading north to see glaciers, polar bears, or the northern lights. The contrast is surreal. One runway, endless ice, and jetliners landing where reindeer sometimes walk. It's just beautiful. Number 3. Matacane Airstrip. Matacane Airstrip in Lesotho isn't just remote, it's insane. Built right into a mountain ridge, this 1,312-foot strip ends abruptly at a cliff with a 500-meter vertical drop. Many takeoffs involve aircraft rolling off the edge before catching enough lift to pull up, turning every departure into a heart-drop moment. The runway sits 7,500 feet above sea level, where thin air drains engine power and demands longer takeoff rolls, something this airstrip doesn't provide. There are no safety barriers, no lighting, and no margin. Miss your mark, and you're airborne, or airborne into a cliff face. Originally constructed to serve nearby villages, it remains a lifeline for emergency evacuations and vital supply runs. Only rugged bush planes with stall capabilities, like the Pilatus PC-6 and Cessna Caravan, even attempt landings here. It's not commercial, it's survival. Pilots call it one of the world's most unforgiving strips. From the cockpit, it feels less like takeoff, more like flying off the edge of Earth. Number 2. Lukla Airport. Lukla Airport, officially known as Tenzing Hillary Airport, is one of the smallest and most dangerous runways in the world. And we're not kidding at all. Sitting at 9,383 feet in Nepal's Himalayas, it's the main access point for anyone heading to Mount Everest. The runway is just 1,729 feet long, with a brutal 12% incline. One end ends in a solid mountain wall. The other, a sheer drop into a deep valley. There's no radar, no control tower, and no second chances. Pilots land uphill and take off downhill. No go-arounds, no automation. Everything is done by sight. Fog can roll in out of nowhere. Winds change direction in seconds. Sudden whiteouts are common. Only small STOL aircraft like the Twin Otter are capable of landing here. It's not just risky, it's essential. This runway serves climbers, trekkers, locals, and medical emergencies. Number 1. Courchevel Altiport. Courchevel Altiport in the French Alps is short, steep, and not for rookies. This mountain runway is just 537 meters long, about 1,762 feet, and has an 18.5% slope built right into the landing strip. That means planes land uphill and take off downhill. There's no room for second chances. If you're landing, you're committing. The runway ends at a drop-off, and there's no go-around. Only specially trained pilots can fly here, and only small private aircraft or helicopters are allowed. It's the gateway to the luxury ski resort of Courchevel, used mostly by wealthy travelers who'd rather skip the winding alpine roads. But it's not just for show. Emergency evacuations and mountain rescue teams also use the strip. With its high altitude and unpredictable weather, landing here takes serious skill. From above, the Altiport looks like a small scar on the snowy mountain. But for those who fly in, it's one of the most intense landings in Europe. If you found this video interesting, please like, share, and subscribe. Thanks for watching. We'll see you soon.